Hello and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be showing you the Arcane Mage and Legion, everything that's been changed about, including baseline abilities, talent points, honor talent points, and the artifact weapon traits and all that. So hope this is useful in telling you how the Arcane Mage might look in Legion when it comes out. But bear in mind this is beta and everything is subject to change, so that's that. So let's get right into it then. Okay, so first off let's look at the baseline abilities that have been changed. First off, we have a new ability called Displacement, which teleports you to where you last blinked from, and resets the cooldown of Blink. So this looks a little bit like this. It's basically another teleport, quite cool. Very useful versus melee from so far, how I've played. It's very funny. And yeah, pretty cool ability all round. Next up we got Frost Nova, that's now baseline, which is quite cool. In case you don't know what Frost Nova does, it freezes stuff that's new. Looks a bit like that. So that's quite cool. Greater Invis is now baseline as well, that's quite cool. Which is basically an instant Invis, and it reduces damage taken by 60% during the invisible and for 3 seconds afterwards. Next up we got that's baseline now is Ice Barrier, that's also baseline. If you don't know what Ice Barrier does, it's just another shield. There you go, looks like that. Presence of Mind is no longer baseline, it's actually a talent, if you can read that. And yeah, it doesn't work the same either. It makes it so that your next 2 Arcane Blasts are instant instead of any ability, which is kind of annoying, but whatever. It's just a slight retraction from the spec, but no, not really that up in arms about it. It's come and gone before. Now, there is no Arcane Brilliance anymore, you might have noticed. There's not really buffs in the game anymore as much, which is kind of weird. Also, Conjure Refreshment Table isn't here either from what I can see, which is a bit weird. You have Conjure Refreshment, but not the table, so that's a bit weird. And that's it for baseline abilities, I think. Next, if we go on to talents, first is the level 15 row, so we've got Arcane Familiar, summons a familiar that attacks your enemies and increases your maximum amount by 10%. This looks a little bit like this. It's a tiny little orb dude. Personally, I'm not too big a fan of the model for this guy. I would have much preferred one of the ones like the little arcane elementals that they do, but that's just my personal opinion. Next we've got Presence of Mind, which is usual Presence of Mind. Well, I already told you what it does. It's a little bit different, but yeah, whatever. And also we have Torrent. Arcane Barrage deals 25% increased damage per target it hits, so that's a bit useless in PvP really, unless if you've got a massive group of people and they're close enough to get hit by multiple Arcane Barrages, but I don't really see this being useful in anything outside of a BG, and even then it's not really going to be that viable. So what else do we have? Level 30 we've got Shimmer, Cauterize and Cold Snap. Shimmer is a new one, teleports you 20 yards forwards unless if something is in the way. Unaffected by the cooldown and castable while casting. Now this is very cool. Have a look at this. So I can be casting, and I can just do this. Teleport in the middle of casting, which is pretty neat. Next up we got Cauterize, which is your usual Cauterize. Fatal damage brings you to 35% health and burns over time. It also now increases your movement speed after you've reached fatal damage by 150%, which is pretty cool. I need to test that out at some point because that looks really overpowered. But it's not that overpowered. I don't know why I said overpowered. It's just it looks a bit silly as all, not overpowered at all. But yeah. Next we have Cold Snap, which is not the usual Cold Snap at all. It makes it so that Ice Block now has 2 charges and also heals you for 30% of your maximum health every 1 second. So pretty much glyph of what's it called? Regenerative Ice coupled with 2 charges of Ice Block. So there you go. Next up we've got Mirror Image, Rune of Power, and Incantus Flow for 45. This is usually where these are the talents that would usually be in the 90 row, but are here for some reason. So Mirror Image, usual. It deals less damage on beta than it does on live for some reason. I think they need to fix the numbers on that because it's really crappy. Rune of Power, places a Rune of Power down, blah blah blah, usual. However, it's been changed so that it increases your spell power by 50%. Well, spell damage, actually. But it increases it by 50% instead of the usual 15, I think it is, on live. So this is really good for burst. It still has the same visual as well, so I'm not going to bother casting that. I say, even though I cast Frost Nova earlier. Incanter's Flow, that's the same as it is on live, I think, pretty much. It's just a passive that increases your damage. Next up, we've got Supernova, charged up on Words of Power for 60. Supernova, usual Supernova, only now it only has one charge, which is pretty weird for me. It pretty much breaks the spell for me, it makes it not useful. Also, it deals much less damage than it does on live for some reason, I think. Yeah, it really does. On live, it does almost as much as an Arcane Blast does at full stacks, and now it just does barely anything. It's kind of useless. Alright. Next we've got Charged Up, immediately grants 4 Arcane Charges. So, this is pretty much the most viable one in the row, in my opinion, as of right now on the beta. But it's kind of boring, because it literally just... Well, I'll show you the visual. That's pretty cool, I guess. Maybe if you pay attention to close details, then maybe you might notice it during a fight, but not really. Probably not. Immediately grants 4 Arcane Charges, so it's pretty much a replacement for Arcane Orb. Much more effective at its job. And yeah. Words of Power grants 1% increased chance to trigger Arcane Missiles per 20% of your mana you have unspent. So pretty much more Arcane Missiles per the amount of mana you've got. Well, a higher chance at least. I don't really see this being viable outside of PvE, really. I don't even know if it would be viable in PvE. It probably is, but whatever. For PvP, eh. I don't see this being viable in live. Next up, we got our 75 talent row. We've got Ice Flows, Ring of Frost, and Ice Ward. Ice Flows, usual Ice Flows. Any cast with a cast time, you can cast while moving. You can use it while casting. It has 3 charges. Yep, there you go. Ring of Frost. Usual Ring of Frost, puts on a ring that freezes enemies when they walk through it. Ice Ward. Frost Nova now has 2 charges, so that's pretty cool. Very useful against melee. And that's about it for 75. 90, you've got Nether Tempest, Unstable Magic, and Erosion. Nether Tempest is, well, on beta, it's still about as useless as it is on live when it comes to damage, although maybe even more useless. It really does nothing in terms of damage. So that's your usual Nether Tempest from WoD. Looks a little bit like this. So it's still got the WoD effect, unlike the Mr. Pandaro one. It just hits enemies around it, it doesn't jump to them or anything. It's pretty boring, really. It's doing a lot of damage to this target dummy, but it usually does very little, because this is a level 680 target dummy, obviously. Anyway. So we've got Unstable Magic. Arcane Blast has a 50% chance to explode on impact, dealing 50% additional damage toward the target and all other enemies within 8 yards. So, yeah, pretty much 50% more damage than the Arcane Blast if you proc it, which is pretty cool. Well, I say it's cool, on live it's crap, but it's better than the other stuff on this row, really. This is the boring row now. 90 has just been played as being the boring row for some reason. Anyway, I digress. Next up we got Erosion. Your attacks erode the target's resistances, increasing all damage the target takes from your spells by 1%, blah 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 blah. Boring! Very dull. Literally just makes it so that the more casts you do, the more damage it takes by up to 8%. And after 3 seconds it runs out, which is really weird. Lastly we got the 100 talent row, which is okay. Casting Arcane Missiles extends Arcane Power by 2%. This is overpowered. Yeah. Well, it's not overpowered, it's just called overpowered. It's actually quite shit. And, yeah. Quickening. Arcane Blast, Arcane Missiles, and Arcane Explosion also grant 2% haste for 6 seconds, stacking up to 100 times. This is quite fun, really, because like it means that your usual 2.1 second cast time of Arcane Blast actually gets, well, quicker the more you cast, so to give a demonstration, this sort of looks a bit like this. Oh. So you can see slowly my arcane blasts are getting a bit faster. Very slowly. I think it's 3% per... No, it's 2% per. So eventually I just reach a hell of a lot of haste. So look at that, that's really quick right there. Arcane Blast going off really quickly. 1.6 cast for Arcane Blast right now. 1.58. So yeah, that demonstrated it pretty well. Don't think I needed to demonstrate it that much, but whatever. Lastly, we got Arcane Orb for our talents. Also an Arcane Orb forward, blah blah blah, typical as live. Looks a little bit like this. Very cool. It's now not really viable, or at least from what I can see, because with charged up you don't need anything else to generate arcane charges. There's not really much point, unless if you want to go for a Arcane Barrage heavy build, there's not much point really. So yeah. So let's move on to Honor Talents. Now, I'm not going to cover all the Honor Talents because some of them are the same for everything. Like, I think these first two rows at least are the same for every like mage, I think, and then these are also the same for every mage. I'm not sure though, but I'll go over this one at least. After you blink, spells have a 100% chance to miss you for 2.5 seconds. This is pretty funny. Basically another defensive and a reason to use blink when fighting, let's say, a ranged class. It's quite cool. Next up we got this lot. Temporal Shield, Dense Ice, and Kleptomania? Something like that. Temporal Shield. This is literally Temporal Shield from Mists of Pandaria. If you don't know what that is, it's basically makes it so that after you use it, any damage you take for 4 seconds will be replenished at the end of it, which is pretty cool. I would demonstrate it, but you have to be in PvP to activate these talents, so whatever. It looks like the Mists of Pandaria one, so whatever. Next up we've got Dense Ice. Increases the amount your ice barrier absorbs by 60%, but your ice barrier can only absorb physical damage. Now this in a duel versus a like melee would be very funny, because Arcane Mage has a what's it called? Artefact trait which already increases the amount your ice barrier absorbs by 100%. So if this is going to be 60% of that already buffed to 100%, that sounds ridiculous, especially against melee, so I'll have to have a look at that later. And lastly we have Kleptomania. Spell steal now has a 15-second cooldown, but it steals all spells from the target. This sounds insane against Resto Druids. Yeah, so that's that. Lastly we got Concentrated Power, Torment the Weak, and Time Anomaly. I cannot speak. Arcane Power lasts 5 fewer seconds, but the damage bonus is increased by 10%. This is kind of weird because, well, the baseline Arcane Power only lasts like 10 seconds. So that means you'd have 5 seconds of Arcane Power for 40% increased damage, which is pretty shitty, really. The only reason why mine lasts 16 seconds, by the way, is because of an artifact weapon trait. Anyway. Torment the Weak increases your damage done by 15% on enemies afflicted by your slow spell or any movement slow effect. This is probably the most viable one out of the three, I think. The Time Anomaly is a bit too random. Moving on to Time Anomaly now to explain what it actually is. Every 5 seconds you have a 5% random chance to gain 4 arcane charges and arcane power for 8 seconds, regardless of its current cooldown. Blah blah blah. A lot of words basically saying every 5 seconds you have a random chance to get, well, exactly that. I don't know why I tried to explain that any further. There was not really much point, but yeah. 4 arcane charges and arcane power for 8 seconds. Pretty cool. Lastly we've got Master of Escape, Rewind Time, and Mass Invisibility. Master of Escape. Reduces the cooldown of great invisibility by 45 seconds. That's pretty solid, yep. Rewind Time increases the duration of displacement by 14 seconds, so that means that you can displace 14 seconds after the usual boundaries of when you would be able to displace, if that makes any sense. So you could displace 14 seconds later than you normally would be able to, so there you go. Not really explaining things, am I? Lastly, Mass Invisibility. You and your allies within 40 yards instantly become invisible for 5 seconds. Dealing damage will cancel the effect. Now this seems a little bit insane. It pretty much makes it so that Arcane Mage could be a replacement for Rogue in the in Arena. So yeah, that's pretty good. Lastly, let's go over the artifact weapon traits. Now, first off, you automatically get Mark of a Lunith when you get the artifact weapon for the first time. So you get this level 100, I think. Yeah, pretty much. It looks a bit like this. This is the only active ability you get with your artifact weapon, sadly. But it's still pretty cool. Hits like a truck and looks badass, so that's pretty cool. Deals damage over time and then explodes, like you just saw. And there you go. The mana traits are very boring, really. They're just increasing damage dealt, blah blah blah. The most interesting ones I've found are this. When Evocate completes, it explodes for the arcane damage equal to 12% of the mana restored. So, to show you what that looks like, I'll just burn down some mana here. It doesn't matter how much it is, just like, you'll still be able to see what it looks like. So, I'll just walk up to it, do this. There you go. It's got the same visual as Mark of a Lunith and some of the other artifact weapon traits. Got this sort of cool arcane stuff around it, so that's pretty cool. Slow down. Slow applies to all enemies within 5 yards of your target, so the slow visual looks slightly different. As you can see, it's slowed these two targets, which is pretty cool. This could be kind of useful in Arena, I guess, maybe. Theoretically. And the rest is just minor stuff, except for the major ones. Touch of the Magi. You might have seen this a couple times during the video. Arcane Blast has a chance to apply Touch of the Magi, accumulating 12% of the damage you deal up to the target for 6 seconds, and then exploding for that amount of arcane damage to the target and nearby enemies. Blah blah blah. Basically, it procs when you use Arcane Blast, and it looks like this, and it deals damage when it explodes. Looks pretty cool. Next we've got Rule of Threes. You have a 33.3% chance to fire 3 additional arcane missiles. Yeah. That's pretty cool. Just a solid damage increase, I guess. Well, proc. Finally, Arcane Rebound. When Arcane Barrage hits more than 2 targets, it explodes for 100,000 damage to all enemies within 10 yards of the primary target. I have never seen this work before because I've never managed to get more than 3 targets be close to each other, so I don't know, maybe I can get it to work here. Nah. That's a disappointment. And that is about it, really. That's pretty much it, guys. Hope you liked the vid. Hope it was useful and showing you some of the new stuff that's been brought to the Arcane Mage. Just going to put in a couple of words at the end of the video, just like what I think about the spec right now. I don't really like how it plays, to be honest. It feels a bit wooden. I don't like... Well, I think I might say this for another video, but basically I'm not liking how it's playing right now. You know, there is a lot of cool new stuff, as you'll have seen, but I might put in some gameplay footage at the end of the video just to show you how it looks in action, but there you go. That was the Arcane Mage in Legion Beta. Hope you liked the vid. If you did, drop a like, comment, subscribe, all that jazz, and see you next time.